Welcome to the Maxwell Leadership Podcast. This is the podcast that adds value to leaders who multiply value to others. My name is Mark Cole, and the reason I pause right there is because I'm a new man because of the subject matter that we're talking about today. So you may know me as Mark Cole, those of you that are very new. This is Mark Cole 2.0 and growing. And that's because what John Maxwell, Tracy Morrow, and I began today is a two-part series on how to change from being a goal-oriented person to a growth-oriented person. If you'd like to download the bonus resource for this episode or watch this episode on YouTube, please visit maxwellpodcast.com/growth-oriented. Now, grab your pen, grab your paper, introduce yourself that's getting ready to change, because John Maxwell is going to give you some things that will help you become better. Here is John.
Improving yourself is the first step of improving everything else in your life. And here's what I learned. That the goals that I achieved were not as important as the growth that I received. The goals help me do better, but growth helps me be better. And if you don't go to the next level, you grow to the next level. If you go to the next level, you may not have the competency to continue growing. But anytime you grow to the next level, it is a natural, organic life that allows you to keep going. You want to grow to where you're going, not go without that growth. Because growth on the inside feeds growth on the outside. All of your goals will be reached during that growth process. So when I became growth-oriented, I made two major changes, okay? And this is going to be really practical for you. Because when I said, okay, now, by the way, I've reached a lot of goals, but I don't set goals. I'm passionate about growth. And so when I started transferring from a goal person to a growth person, there's something I immediately discovered, and that was, and I'm going to give there were two changes I made. The first change is this. I changed from growth in everything to growth in essential things. In other words, the goal is not to get you to know everything and grow in every area. The goal is for you to grow in what I've been calling today the everyday essentials. In the beginning of my growth, I was trying to learn everything. And I was realizing that learning everything isn't going to help me at all. And a whole bunch of stuff that I'm learning is not going to contribute at all to my success or significance in life. So I began to understand that I was going to have to narrow down the areas that I grew in. I had to forget about knowing everything, and I had to focus on knowing the essential things. Now, this took me a considerable amount of time. It's not going to take me much time to teach it to you, but this took me 18 months because I kept trying out different things. And is this essential for my success? And I would discover, well, no, it's not. It's good, but it's not essential. So I'd put it aside. And so what took me 18 months to discover, I'm going to give it to you now, because we're going to spend the rest of our time on 5 things. But the 5 things we're going to spend the rest of our time on, I'm going to promise you that's all the return that you need to be successful in life and significant will be given to you through these 5 areas. They're the 5 essentials. These aren't like things that you should get to someday or perhaps try out sometime. I've got it figured out. These are the essentials. And you just take the word clear, C-L-E-A-R. Because each letter represents a different word. The letter C is communication. The L is leadership. The E is equipping. The A is attitude. And the R is relationships. If you can excel in those 5 areas, you will excel in any business that you ever engage in. That's a fact. So the first change I made was I'm not going to grow in everything. I'm just going to grow in the essential things. And by the way, if we were in Q&A, you would find that I don't do what you do most of your days. Most of the things that you do every day, I never do. Not because they're wrong. There's nothing wrong. It's just not in my essentials. And if I'm doing something that's not essential, it's not going to give me the return I want. Trust me, it's not wrong. It's even good. It's just not essential. The second change I made with this growth mindset is I started to have growth with a timeline. I had growth with a timeline, and I changed it to growth without a finish line. I took the timeline out of my growth system. Because in the beginning, everything I did, I'd say, okay, I'll get this done at this certain time. And I was putting deadlines and timelines on my growth. Well, let me tell you where it started. It started when I heard Earl Nightingale. Earl Nightingale said something one time. I was in my 20s. He said, if you'll spend 1 hour a day, every day, on one subject and only one subject, he says an hour every day on that subject, in 5 years, you'll become an expert on the subject. And I was at that time very passionate about leadership because I had come to the conclusion everything rises and falls on leadership. And so I'm 20, what would I be? I was probably 26. And when Earl Nightingale said, if I spend 1 hour a day, every day on one subject for 5 years, I'd be an expert on it. I said, I'm going to do that with leadership. And that's exactly what I did. Every day, 1 hour. Read leadership, talk to leaders, ask leadership questions, do leadership projects every day an hour. Leadership, leadership, leadership. And Earl Nightingale said, 5 years, I could be an expert. 5 years. Wow. So I started my growth journey like Cape Canaveral. I did a countdown. 5, 4, 3. I'm going to blast off. I'm going to be a leader, an expert leader. Halfway through the 5 years, halfway through the countdown, and every day I'd say, how long will it take? Well, how long will it take? Well, Earl said 5 years. Oh, how long will it take? 5? I'm in my second year, 4 years. How long will it take? How long will it take? And halfway through that 5 years, I began to change. And I began to change because I was practicing leadership on a daily basis, and I was learning to lead, and I was becoming a better leader, and more people were joining my team, and I was starting to have leadership success, and the thrill of growth, the joy of seeing where I was and now where I am, the understanding now that if I was intentional in my personal growth, my life would get wonderfully better, and feeling the exhilaration of growing and learning and improving. About halfway through that 5 years, how long will it take? How long will it take? How long will it take? One day I said, I'm never going to ask that question again because I'm growing. I'm getting better. In fact, I changed the question from how long will it take to how far can I go? How far can I go? And by the way, I was asking that question at 26. Can I tell you something? At 76, I'm still asking that question. How far can I go? I have no idea. I'm not even there. I'm not even close to being there. Oh my gosh. I understand my father, who worked full-time up through the age of 95, when we were having lunch one day at 92, and he's looking at me, he's 92, and he said, son, he said, I've been thinking about my life, and he said, I believe my greatest days are still ahead. He's 92. My greatest days are still ahead. Some people are 22 and can't say that. And and when I started writing books, I thought, I wonder when there'll be a day that I'll not be creative, and I wonder when there'll be a day when I sit down. I write with a 4-color pen on a legal pad. I write all my books out by hand, And I said, I wonder if there'll be a day when I'll sit down and there's just nothing there. And what I've discovered is it's never happened, and the list gets longer of things I want to write. You see, when you live in this growth world, in this creative world, when you're in the game every day, you never run out of fuel. In fact, you don't understand it. The more you give, the more you receive. And there's, there's just like this abundance that begins to happen. And now I'm looking at it, and I've got more books to write than I've ever had to write. And I think, I may have to live to be 200. I don't know what's going to happen here. You understand? But one of the books I'm going to write is going to be entitled, Is There a Finish Line? It's going to be a great book. I wouldn't write anything else. Is there a finish line? And it's going to be a question, because for most people, the answer is yes. For most people, there's a finish line. In this business right here, when people sometimes they make enough money to take care of their needs, they say, well, this is all I wanted, this is all I need. And so they just stop. Sometimes people say, well, at this age, I think I'll retire. I don't know. So for most people, they have a finish line. I have none. I have none. Because here's what I know about a self-imposed finish line. And by the way, any finish line that you have, you put it there. So don't look at me. You put it there. There was some time in your life you said, at that age, I'm done. When I get that much money, I'm done. Let me say this. You perhaps don't know this, but if you have a superimposed finish line, self-imposed, when you cross that line, you're finished. What part of that do you not understand?
Hey, podcast listeners. Many of you listening right now would probably love the autonomy that comes with owning your own business or becoming a coach that helps other businesses succeed. Well, we have a phenomenal strategy where you are 100% in control of your own business, earning income on your own terms, and have access to the people, tools, and resources you need to build a thriving leadership development business. When you become a Maxwell Leadership Certified Team member, you join a global community of entrepreneurs led by our expert team of mentors and faculty, including John C. Maxwell. You'll also get one of the top leadership certifications in the world next to your name, giving you the boost you need to get started. Visit us online at maxwellleadership.com/join the team to find out more.
Hey, welcome back. I hope that you were convicted if you had a finish line. In fact, some of you are looking forward to 2024 and you're going, my last year of working. It may be your last year of your current position, but if you just heard John, it's just the beginning of what you're getting ready to do. There's no finish line. And I love this lesson. I love this two-part series that we're doing, especially this time of the year, because in the next 10 to 15 days, I, along with many of you that listen to this podcast, will take time and will reflect on 2023. We'll begin planning out 2024. And today I'm joined with a leader. Tracy Morrow is a leader that knows about growing yourself to become better and not just setting goals to accomplish. And so I'm very excited. This is a lesson that I love. I put it into practice. And Tracy, I know you do too. I'm so glad to kind of jump in and talk about this with you.
I'm excited to be here and talk about it with you, Mark, as we are ending this year, or whenever you are listening to this podcast. There is something for every single person to immediately apply, which is amazing. So let's dive right in. Once again, leadership is the ideas that we have about leadership is turned upside down, and it's the opposite of what we thought, because we tend to think of how can we step into the next level. And he talks about we don't want to step up before we are ready to, that we have already grown into that next position, and that we don't want to rush the process, which I love when John turns things upside down on us because it means there's always a place for us to grow. So my first question for you, Mark, is how do you as a leader see or determine when the goals that you have maybe are beyond the growth of yourself or of your team? And what do you do about that?
Yeah, so I have this philosophy on goals. It's been shaped by John. I've ran John's companies now for 14 years. And before that, I was a contributor for another 10 years of helping John and the companies be successful. And certainly I've done that with goals, financial aspirations, personal goals. I've become a better parent. I've become a better spouse to my wife because of goals. So it's sometimes when you talk about being growth oriented, not goal oriented, it's almost like we hear, let's just throw goals out. That's never what John or any of us believe. But the true indicator of our success, I believe, is about growth. That's why we can talk about getting a return on failure. That's why we can talk about being bigger on the inside than the outside, is because there is this growth-oriented way about the way that we approach success, the way we approach momentum. But let me say this about goals, just because we're talking about this for a moment.
Yeah.
I love setting goals that I'll never reach. Now, I had a teammate one time, a CFO, that would chastise me and say, if you don't hit the goal that you set, you lose credibility. Why would you set a goal that you're not going to hit, a financial projection, a financial goal? And I absolutely understood what he meant. Because we should, if we're going to put something down that we're going to accomplish as business leaders, we should hold ourselves accountable, responsible for hitting that goal. But the reason I love to set goals that I miss is because I have found I accomplish more when I set a goal that has an only God component to it. God's got to show up for us to hit this goal. And I have found that we have been able to accomplish more as an aspirational goal than an achievable goal. And so when I'm doing finances and I'm spending money and I'm building teams and making sure that we hit it, I hit an attainable goal. But in every other area of my life, or most of other area of my life, I set aspirational goals. Goals that will challenge me to do more than I would do if I just set an attainable goal. So that's kind of my little piece there, Tracy, because I do believe in goals. I do set goals, but the object and certainly the subject of this lesson is about growth.
So it's not necessarily about having a goal that's too big for yourself or for your team, but setting a goal that is something that you also have a growth plan so that you and your team can grow to that goal necessarily. Because I think sometimes people set goals, but then they don't necessarily have a growth plan for how they can grow into that. So I think when you talk about, if you could expand on that a little bit, like when you talk about an only God component, there needs to be a practical side, which is what John goes right into, and that is the clear plan. So if you could share a little bit with maybe some of our first-time listeners or people who have been listening to us for a while, but they aren't sure about our clear growth plan and how somebody can set maybe a God-only goal, but then they also want to have a growth plan for how they and their team can grow toward that big goal.
Yeah, Tracy, I love this question. I love this angle that you're going, because I just mentioned earlier in the lesson comments that I'm getting ready to do my year-end review. And it's where I go review what I set out to do in the current year, the end of the current year that we're in, and move toward what I'm projecting to do in the next year. And I remember 3 years into this process that now is 21 years old. It's finally an adult, Tracy. My year-end review process is 21 years old. And I remember 3 years into this process, I had set a lot of ideas and thoughts out there. And that third year, back when I was 33, I felt compelled to set some very tangible goals for the next 12 years. I was 33 and I set some life goals that were aspirational, absolutely, but they were tangible too. I would know whether I hit them or not. And so I was 33 and I said, by the time I am 45, I want to accomplish X. And I listed 42 things. Tracy, I listed things like I wanted to 10X. I wanted to make 10 times more my current salary. I laugh about that now because I should have put a lot more because I was getting paid dirt by Enjoy back then, okay? John was in close conflict to child labor laws, and I wasn't even a child. They were not paying me hardly anything. And then I was single at the time, but I had been with Stephanie at the point, and I said, I want to get married. And I even put on there, I put 42 things, but one of the things I put on there is I wanted to have 5 children. What I didn't realize, Tracy, at 33, that it takes 2 people to make that decision, okay? And so for years, I've laughed about it and said, literally, 42 things with that level of specifics. I wanted to be the leader of John Maxwell's company by the time I was 45. 42% of the things that I set as a telemarketer at 33 years of age with great specifics, I accomplished before I was 45. Wow. 82%. And I would talk about that, and I've shared stories about that. Perhaps I've shared that on the podcast. One that I had not accomplished, just a quick little funny side note, one that I had not accomplished was 5 children, because when Stephanie and I got married, she went, hey, bud, had a tough pregnancy, not doing it again. Hope you still want to get married. I went, yeah, I want to still get married. Of course, Macy came along 2 years later. So for years, we've had 2 daughters, and I went, well, it's 82% because I only have 5 children. Well, about a year ago, Stephanie and I have been able to play an active role in our grandchildren's life. And so guess how many kids are in our home every single day right now? 5 kids. Even my kid projection made it. So I'm now at 86% of the things that I said. But here's my point. Thanks for letting me have fun, number one. But here's my point. I absolutely believe in attainable, achievable, quantifiable, know that you hit it goals. I absolutely do, and every year. And coming up for 2024, for those of you that are listening to this real time, I will have tangible goals for 2024 that I will know if I hit or missed. But don't miss the point of this lesson in that the most important goal that you should have is a growth goal. Because John says that growth will make you better and goals will make you do better. You want to be better so that you can do more than you ever did. And I can tell you this because I have been more conscious about growth than I have goals. I've accomplished more with my life in a shorter period of time than I ever would have if I'd have stuck with just goals and not made it about growth. Growth guarantees a better tomorrow. Always make sure that you're growing, and then you have tangible growth ideas or growth objectives to support that growth.
Got that. That's so good. I do want to highlight the fact that we're at 82%. And when you added your 4 grandkids to your home, making you hit 5 kids, that it only went up 4%. I think that seems really unfair that adding 4 kids to raise only adds 4%.
Only got 4% more of my goal. I have not thought of that, but that right there makes me depressed. So give me just a minute.
That is not 4% of your energy, time, effectiveness, or your impact in this world. So I think it's much more than 4% of what you are doing in this world. So before we go to part 2 of what he talked about, goal-oriented versus growth-oriented, I do want to hit on when he talked about, talking about changing, how long will it take to beginning to ask, how far can I go? So I have 2 questions for you. Number 1, are you surprised by how long it takes? And number 2, are you surprised by how far you're going or how far you've gone so far?
Yeah, so the answer is yes for both of those. When I look back over 23 years, 24 now, years of being with John and being on this team, and I look at how long it has taken me to master some things that I am, to be honest with you, still struggling with, I go, wow, this has been quite a long journey. But at the same time, I look at some of the things that in 2023 that John, our team, what my little bit of contribution as leader of this team has accomplished. And Tracy, you're a board member. Many people don't know that, but you're a board member of our nonprofit. It staggers me, the things that we have celebrated in 2023, the magnitude of them. We would have never set the goals, numbers of what we've accomplished and celebrated in 2023, some of them in 7 quote unquote short years. So there's days that I look and go, wow, it has taken me forever to think like this. I feel so immature sometimes in my thinking and in my commitments and in my diligence to what is essential to be successful. And then at other times I look at it and go, I can't believe we've accomplished that. I didn't think there were enough days in mine and John's lifespan added together to be able to accomplish some of the stuff we have celebrated in the year 2023. Why is that? I believe because of all of my heart, it's because we are growth oriented. We had one of our nonprofits, Tracy, had an event this year. We call it the Leadership Open. This year in 2023, we were at Pebble Beach. Next year, we're at Pinehurst. It's a brilliant event. We literally had an accomplishment of a response to people that wanted to partner and donate to our organization that was larger than any we have ever had. It was staggering. In fact, when I went back 10 short years and realized how far we've come just in 10 years, it was even more staggering. You know what John Maxwell's conversation with me was one weekend after that record-breaking, that was a multiple of 10 bigger than it had been 10 years before? Mark, if we'd have done this, if we'd have done that, if we'd have had the right people in this environment and the right people in that environment, it would have been a whole lot more. Now, is that greedy? I dare say no. It is not greedy by John Maxwell. Number one, he has no benefit to it. What it is it is a leader that says we might have accomplished greater than I've ever thought we could have, but there's always room for improvement. There's always ways to be better stewards of the influence that we've been given. And I think it's that holy discontent that you see in people like John Maxwell, leaders that are accomplishing great things, that are never sitting back satisfied with the accomplishment. They're always looking forward to the aspiration. And that's what we're after right here, is being in the mindset that there is no finish line. There is no success indicator that gives us an excuse to sit back and relax and celebrate for too long. In fact, we have a 24-hour rule. Celebrate big monumental moments like we've celebrated in 2023 for about 24 hours. And then get off your rear end and let's go create another record, another goal, another growth aspiration to accomplish.
Mm-hmm. I want to highlight there a couple things that you said, that you do allow yourself time to celebrate with the team. That holy discontent doesn't mean that you are discontent or you don't celebrate those huge wins. That you and John are, as a company, as a team, that there is a celebration, that you are hearts full of gratitude, that you are, as a team and just together, there is this moment where you look back and you thank God and you thank your team and you do celebrate together. But I remember John saying one time that he used the term an autopsy on success, where it's a dissecting of what you've done for the purpose of exceeding expectation and for having excellence in what you do. So I just want to clarify that, because I think sometimes someone could listen to that and a leader might think that they don't take the time to celebrate with their team and give gratitude and thankfulness, both to God, but also, if they're a person of faith, but also to their team, to let them have the win and celebrate those wins as well. The other thing I wanted to mention before we move to this next one, and there's a lot to unpack there, is when you said 24 years with John and that you were surprised by how long it takes. I think when John talks about so often that consistency compounds, you've been consistent for so long, and so many things that you've learned about leadership you've been in the years where it's been consistent. You've been consistent. The things that you've been doing have been consistent. And you're coming up on the years where that compounds and you start to see a multiplying value where you start to say, wow, look at what that's doing. And you start to see the percentage grow really quickly, where people now are starting to see, like, we'll start to see in the years to come, wow, look at it. Seems like almost an overnight success, but it's because of the 24 years from where you were a telemarketer and the slow, consistent steps that you took to now that people haven't seen. I just want to point that out too, because I think sometimes you can show up to a podcast like this and it sounds like all the success stories, which you're so great about showing all the times where it was hard too. But
there's just a lot of those hard times, Tracy. There's a lot of the mistakes to share,
especially lately. But I think it's really important to note when you say it seems surprising that it's taken so long, and that's just, there's been a lot of behind the scenes consistency that show up as well. Okay, so back to how long will it take versus how far can I go? I feel like everyone, whether they realize it or not, most leaders do have in their mind a finish line. And so what would you say are common finish lines that you see in the leaders that you talk to? And how can they change that to how far can I go?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Tracy. And I have seen a lot of leaders, they attach finish line to retirement age. I'm 65, I'm stopping. I've seen parents call getting kids to college their finish line. I've got them out of the house, thank God. I've watched people call the 2-week notice the finish line. And I love what John says. He says, never leave something, always go to something. Never finish your vocational career, because some of you have to age out. It's a company requirement. It's an educator's requirement. It's some kind of a responsibility. Maybe you're in the military and there is an age out time. But never retire from what your life is supposed to be about. I love how John talks about retirement. He says that one day somebody asked him when he was going to retire, and he said, what is retirement? They said, that's when you can spend all your time doing what you want to do. John went, my goodness, I've been retired for years. I've been doing what I want to do when I want to do it all of my life. Here's the point. I think most people see a transition out of a job, a transition in their lifetime, or a transition with a relationship as a finish line. And I disagree. I think it's actually a starting line for a new dimension of your influence. We have Maxwell Leadership Team, 50,000 coaches, speakers, trainers now, Tracy. We just crossed over in the last 30 days, 50,000. And I love the ones that come in at 70, 75 years of age. Now, we have 20, 25-year-olds as well. But I love those people that come in and say, hey, I know what my age says, but my passion to make a difference says something completely different. It's Melvin Maxwell, John's dad, that at 92 called John in one day to his work environment, what he was doing, which was creating a ministry in the extended care living that he was doing. And at 92, he said, John, I've been thinking, and my best years are ahead. And I think that's what John's saying at 76. I hope that's what you're saying at podcast listener. That's certainly what I'm saying. I've been with John for 23, almost 24 years now. I'm growing. I've got a year in review that's coming up. That's because I am growth oriented. Podcast listeners, if you would all watch YouTube today, I would look you deep in the eyes and I would say you need to learn more about being growth oriented. You need to learn what that looks like. In fact, we've created a whole entire online course that we're offering for a huge discount to the 15 Laws of Growth online course. In fact, you have two options to gain access to this course. You can either purchase the course for a one-time payment of $99. Now hold up. $99, you will not find that online. In fact, you'll find $400, $500 of value here. That's what we're selling it for. But our team looked at one another and said, our best family, and the way to tell you, and some of you just joined, this is your first podcast. Guess what? You're in the family. Because we're taking a $499 product and we're giving it to you as a podcast listener only for $99. The other thing you can do, you can sign up for Maxwell Leadership Growth Plan for as little as $9.99 a month and gain instant access to that course and even more courses through our Growth Plan platform. By the way, the price for this course, as I've already said, is over $400. You can get it either for $99 or $9.99 a month through our Growth Plan. Now, I would recommend some of you that's already joined to give it as a gift. For others of you, I would challenge you to give it as a gift and take a teammate or maybe a family member on the journey with you. You can find the link for all of this by scrolling down to the show notes wherever you're listening, and you'll be able to get that crazy discount because you're a podcast listener. Here's why. Tracy, and we got to wrap up today, and we'll be back next week with part 2. Please be back with us. But here's why we're doing this today. We're coming to the end of the year. You have made a commitment to invest in yourself because you've invested 35 minutes with us already today. And we believe that everyone deserves to be led well. We believe that I need access, but we also believe that you need to bet on yourself. And why not make a decision this week to bet on yourself in 2024, in the next year? Some of you are going to be listening to this already in 2024. Make the decision today to bet on yourself. One of our listeners, I love to kind of close the session out with one of our listeners, and today from the country of Gambia, which is, by the way, the smiling coast of Africa. I love Gambia, how you describe where you are on the continent of Africa. I love what Sidi said. Hi, Mark. Greetings from Gambia, the smiling coast of Africa. Looking back 3 years ago, I can't put into words the profound impact your podcast, let me change that, our podcast, Sidi. I love how you did that. How our podcast has had on me, my family, and the broader society. Never a week goes by without spending an hour or two listening to the podcast, and the ROI of this investment is beyond measure. Please keep doing what you're doing and continue to infuse your passion into every episode. Sidi, you put that in, you got that from the podcast, Things That Do Not Require Talent. We'll put the show link into the notes so the rest of you can hear that. But you've caught the vision. The ROI on investing yourself will give you a greater return than you ever imagined. It may take a little longer, like Tracy and I have talked about in this session. It may take you a little bit more patience and more perseverance, but I can tell you this, it'll take you farther. It will give you a greater return. And Sidi, that is what you're saying. I listen to the podcast, I get a return. Go take advantage of that online course, or you can invest in yourself monthly and get to be a part of it well. We do this podcast. We'll be back next week with part 2 because everyone deserves to be led well.